It is titled Global Smart City Key Leadership Interview. There are 5 rounds of 10-minute interview in this session. We are pleased to have Mr. Norman Anderson as an interviewer. He is a chairman and CEO of CGLA Infrastructure and the Strategic Infrastructure Performance Institute, located in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And it is with great pleasure that I invite 2 interviewees onto the stage. Professor Young-Sup and Dr. Jong-Sung Hwang, please come up on stage and take your seats. Dr. Jong-Sung Huang is a lead researcher of National Information Society Agency, and distinguished Professor Young-Sup serves as a faculty of BK21 HRD program of Smart City Global Convergence at Seoul National University. And Michael Woods, CEO and COO of Bigson Holdings Group, Ms. Jennifer Schmitz, CEO of Lattice Industries, and Professor Youngsang Kwon is in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Seoul National University, participate in this session virtually. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Norman Anderson and all of his interviewees. Mr. Norman Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you all. As Professor Weiss said, we would prefer to be with you all in person, but it's really great to see everybody and to see people, as Professor Char said, who we were together with in person in May, and now to see you virtually. We're going to do a quick round of questions. I think we have a phenomenally interesting panel, and so I'd like to make sure that they have a chance to really express some of the key ideas in smart cities, and especially, I think, keying off what Professor Weiss said on the leadership side. So let me start with a question to every one of the panelists, and if you all could answer briefly, but with a high degree of insight, that would be fantastic. This is by way of introducing yourselves. The question is, each one of you is a leader in terms of smart cities, smart city infrastructure. And when I look at smart cities, you know, I break it down into a couple of areas where you need to exercise leadership. I think one is technology. Another one is the business model, right? It's not really going to work unless there's a business model, even if it's a public sector entity or organization. It needs a business model that's sustainable. And the third one is, as Professor Weiss said at the end, some sort of a governance model, rules. How do we guide the process? So, you know, where do you exercise leadership? And if I could, as a way to introduce people, why don't we give everybody 3 minutes to answer that question? On my agenda, Michael, you appear first, so I'm going to go to you first, if that's okay. Unmute, Michael.
Trying to be safe and just muted too much. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Norman, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the wonderful invitation. A little bit early in the United States, but that's okay. That's how it happens with international business. I agree with you on leadership being in those 3 areas of technology, the business model, governance, and the rules base. There's other parts of leadership that we also should consider here for smart cities. It's really all about the people, as any business is. And a smart city infrastructure is a business. Right? It's not just about the digitization it's about the business of the operations of the smart city ecosystem. So it's really about both the public and the private interaction and the leadership that makes that interaction happen between local government officials, between all the business vendors, which there are many of them, to make a smart city ecosystem work, and of course about the public's involvement, belief, and as Professor Char said earlier, the inspiration of those citizens to make sure that they buy into what the smart city benefits are for them over time. So some of the things that we want to make sure on a leadership basis that happens for any kind of smart city introduction, implementation, and execution it's also all about the education. Why is this important? Why does this mean something to me as a citizen, to me as a business, to me as a leader? Why does that have to be something that's in my city? Why do I need it, right? And that education can't be one time. It has to be constant for them at all different levels of the rollout, of the beginning of the different systems. Why are there so many cameras around my city? As a perfect example, is my individual information being used in some way that I don't approve of? Most especially here in the United States, that's one of the biggest issues is data privacy. How is that being used, and how private is my data when you're gathering so much around my environment that you want to use in some kind of way, and how are you using it? So really it's the education of that and the coordination with those city planners and the private sector vendors and the public users and providers of that data. And then lastly, Norm, I'd say it's the consistency of that leadership. One thing that we see too often in the public side and also the private side is when you go down a long 3 to 5 year business plan of rolling out a smart city ecosystem, all those public officials, the city planners, the government officials that are elected or not elected, et cetera, you're coming in and out of different regimes. That's extremely challenging. So usually it would be much better to have a consistency of those leadership teams, public and private, to make sure that you have resiliency of your plan, you have sustainability of your plan, and of course leadership when it's extended usually is much more impactful than leadership that's changed halfway through a plan.
That's great, Michael. And amazingly, you took exactly 3 minutes too, which is very impressive. The next speaker I'd like to go to is Jong-Sung Hwang, who's the lead researcher at the National Information Society Agency. Could you answer the same or address the same issue in terms of where you exercise leadership?
I think so. The leadership is the area leadership is important. Is I think visioning, so visioning and developing strategy. So I think there are two types of smart cities. So in extreme, so how to say, ideal types. So one is improving the current city. The other is to creating new city. So many smart cities so far focus on solving the urban problems, very difficult urban problems. So that is good thing. But a smart city should go further. So we can think about a city into perspective, passive and active. So if we think a city is just a space people live in, then it is a passive city. But we can also think about active city. So active city means that a city help citizens to do more things or to do their business. So far, city has been passive. So our main objective is to eliminate the problem from city and make citizens live without a big problem. But smart city open new ways. So to realize the active city. So active city means that city not only provide a space, a city, but also provide tools for citizens to use in their everyday life and everyday business. So for instance, so smart city can provide devices as common goods, provide data for common goods. So at the moment, many company and many citizens have to buy their own device, have to subscribe to broadband internet service, and have to buy data for themselves. But the smart city can provide many resources as common goods, just like providing roads, streets, providing the street light, providing security. So there's a possibility to make use of smart city for the bigger and for a longer purpose. So I think leadership is very critical to making this kind of possibility a reality. Okay, thank you.
That's really great. Thank you so much. Both of the first answers I thought were phenomenal because they really make you think about some of the key issues. So it's becoming increasingly challenging. Let me go to my friend Jen Schmitz, who is the CEO of Lattice Industries. Jen, talk about how you think about leadership in terms of smart cities.
So in our model, and what we focus on is really the regional exchange of this large quantity of data and how that actually affects down to the citizen, through to the business, and then through to the government. And what we think, in terms of everything I've seen in a smart city and what some cities try to be as a smart city, the two main literal devices that actually make people successful are collaboration and facilitation. And so if you're going to have a smart city, you have to be able to take all the stakeholders and help them collaborate to see the value of the proposition of the data that's going to be exchanged. They also have to acknowledge the risks of the data that's going to have to be exchanged. So the collaboration as a leader and understanding those and how to bring people to the table that may most times have conflicting views, but everyone knows that the benefit of using metadata and other data in an enriched version can help all these cities solve their problems, but they actually have to get to the table first to discuss those problems. And that's where you have to have leadership on these regional and local levels that have opened their eyes to the education, as some of the other panelists have mentioned, and also to really opening to that to a transparency and enabling that collaboration to build a trust that a marketplace that facilitates the masses is actually going to enrich everyone, bringing that value back to the citizens, bringing the value back to the government, as well as enriching the businesses as they can go and access data sources they've never received before. So it's really about the collaboration in our eyes.
That's really great. And, the data exchange that you're talking about, creating a real marketplace for smart city data is, I think, unique. The next speaker is Young-Sup, the Distinguished Professor of Smart Cities at Seoul National University. And I'd really like to ask the same question of you. It's a real good way for the audience to get to know you, especially the international audience. So where do you exercise leadership in terms of your smart city work and practice?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Actually, very nice to see you again. Very late night in your city, all right? The past midnight.
It is. Thank you so much.
Yeah, past midnight. Okay. So
Yes.
I completely agree with you. In that leadership is going to be a most important part of the success for the success of the smart cities. Actually, I think that. Leadership needs to be started from the creating the shared vision of for certain smart cities. Actually, in order to create the vision, of course, we need to understand what kind of needs, what kind of wants the people have, or we need to actually educate people with some new way of life, new way of the enabling technologies. So actually follow the people or lead people. Actually the leadership must play a role of the doing both ways. So actually in order to do so, as you mentioned, the key parts, including technology, business model, and governance, as you mentioned, could be a very important issue. Actually, in order to exercise the leadership. So, but these three elements must be integrated. In some sense, rather than individual approach, we need a very holistic approach by embodying, integrating these three the elements. So basically, I have maintained a very the converging style of life, starting with the industry for 30 years, including the 10 years as a CEO, and serving for the country as a government official for twice, for 5 years, and now they are 6 years with the academia. So I think that by making the most of my career, I'd like to accomplish kind of the real understanding or real collaboration among the leaders, especially in the area of the government, the industry, and university, academia, in other words, and the research institutes. So those the leaders needs to be cooperating each other. So I'll do my best to create leadership consensus to eventually in order to create consensus among people for our future smart cities. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, especially since you've worked in all of the different areas. I think that's really important to have that perspective. It's almost to have that empathy. And the last presenter in the first round, my last victim, is Young-Sung Kwon, the professor at Seoul National University. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. It's nice to meet you, all of you. I don't know who you are, and I don't know where you are. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Not good night, not yet.
Not yet.
I'm professor of urban design in Seoul National University and director of a smart city education program funded by the Korean government. And it's very impressive today's very organized conference, I think that. And clearly, I think the emergence of the smart cities is new opportunities in terms of the digital transformation and the development of the data-based infrastructure. This is the main issues for this conference. And Korea is also pushing the smart city as a national policy very vigorously and is trying to form a global leadership, I think. And also many infrastructures are being reconfigured to fit smart cities. In the past, I think that the construction companies did the construction in Korea, but now the telecommunications or IT companies are transforming into the construction companies now. Related to that, this topic of this session, the global key leadership, I will comment about the Korean experience and the urban planning expert. The first one is about the Korean leadership, I think. As a country, you know that as a country with a lot of experience in urban development in short period of time, Korea successfully created many cities in about only 50 years after the Korean War. It developed industrial cities that created Samsung Electronics and Hyundai Motors, successively created metropolitan areas. You know, I don't know that you know the cities of the Dundang, Ilsan is a well-known of the Korean new towns near that Seoul to ease the concentration in metropolitan area. Also, the smart cities like Songdo is well known as a smart cities of Korea were also developed. And you know that the Sejong city, the second capital of Korea, was also developed to prevent the concentration of the Seoul metropolitan area. Because of this experience of that many the city built, Korea is actively participating in urban development project in the neighborhood developing countries, and is demonstrating is a global leadership, I think. I also actually participate in several international urban development projects. I'm sorry, today I'm another place right now because I'm going to attend another planning meeting for the Indonesian, the new capital city master plan today.
Wow.
For a while. And what I felt while this kind of conducting several international urban development projects was that our technology could not directly apply to other countries. In some countries, it rains a lot. For some countries, there is no internet services. And in some countries, we focus on that the public transportation, about the private mobilities, but these countries, there's even no the public transportation service were not available in there. So I think that there is a big gap of that smart city development situation. So I think that the first important point of the global leadership is to take into account the circumstance of the other countries. We need to get away from the idea that the image of the smart city is single. The vision may be different. I think that 100 cities can have 100 smart city technologies and visions in there, I think. So the second is that nonetheless, we face the similar problem in all the countries and the cities. It is a matter of climate change and carbon emissions. It's the same with the global food problem. It is the same that. And this area, there's a problem of sharing the rules of development and underdeveloped countries, I think. In this part, the political interest between the countries of the developed countries and underdeveloped countries should co-work together and co-work and the global network and talk together very much. On the global issues, the richer countries should take a lead and pay more to improve their cities to support that other underdeveloped countries. But it is very difficult to solve this problem. It is related to international policies and politics there. But we should concentrate that the global leaders giving that some insight. Even the rest, we should invest and co-work together to overcome this gap of each nations and cities, I think. So I think that for this reason, the global leadership is important to lessening the gap of each cities for next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's really an interesting panel with, I think, a lot of phenomenal insights. You guys have already gotten me thinking a lot of different ways, and you come at it from a number of different perspectives. Michael, I'm going to go back to you because one of the issues you mentioned is thinking about customers, and that's one of the questions I have. A lot of times, especially in the U.S., when you think about a smart city, you're thinking about technology, you're thinking about, what one of the panelists mentioned, solving, I think, eliminating all the problems that we already have. But, how do you think about the customers? How do you put customers into this conversation so that, we can be smart about who the customers are, and the customers can have an ability. I guess one of the panelists talked about making the customers active, giving them tools to be able to do things in cities that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to do. Can you just talk about how you think about customers?
Sure. That's a very good question. And there's quite a few different levels of customers inside a smart city ecosystem, right? It's not just the person that's utilizing the data and servicing the data. They're both a customer and they're a vendor of the data, right? On both sides. The customer is also all of us, right? We're customers in some way when we're providing our services, but we're also utilizing services in the city and providing data into that side of the transaction, which Jennifer talked about earlier about the importance of that data and the security of the data. So really to us, the customer side, it varies, right? In terms of the level of the customer, the needs of the customer, and of course the wants of the customer, which of course is the biggest place to focus on. Right? The only reason the customer is going to use something is because they want to use something, not because they need to. The need may not be understood, but the desire and the want it is understood very well by the customer, and that's what we all focus upon all the time. So in a global smart city as well, that customer, let's start first with the citizenship, the engagement and the participation of the citizens. There, it's not so much about gathering personal data, but it's more so about building upon some kind of open source technology which enables those citizens or those customers, those clients, those communities to gather that information on their environment and make it available to the public via the smart citizen or the smart city platform. So that's customer number one, right? Customer number two is really who are those different vendors that are providing those open source platforms by which all this information is going to move through, all the transactions are going to happen. Customer number three, if you just think of the tech stack here, right? Customer number three is going to be who are those device manufacturers that are going to be putting all of those sensors everywhere and putting all of the towers up and making sure that all of the connectivity between them works, not just in terms of linkage, but in terms of MTM, the machine-to-machine transaction, which then becomes customer number four, which is the software side of it. And then, of course, keep going up the tech stack on the customer side. Then you've got to store this data somewhere. And then the last tech stack is you've got to do something with the data, right? So what are you going to do with it? Obviously, AI comes into play here. So AI becomes a customer, right, in terms of utilization of the data, monetization of the data, smart usage of the data, right? So you have, Norm, it's a really complex and extensive question for sure, but that customer really starts at the use level, and then really you just follow the tech stack, right, for a smart city in terms of that data management, that software and hardware connectivity, and then, of course, all of the data usage and monetization ability, or not, if you haven't built the whole system properly all the way up the tech stack, the customers move all the way up and down it.
That's really interesting. My sense as I listen to you, Michael, is we're going to have a lot of divergence in terms of the answer to this question. So I think you got us headed super in the right direction. Let's hear a little bit from Jong-Sung Hwang, lead researcher at National Information Society Agency, in terms of this question, because I really think this is an interesting question. How do you make a smart city customer-centric?
Yeah, you give very difficult question. It's very difficult because city is a citizen customer. To be a customer, citizen have a choice. Have a choice between accept and reject. So citizen means someone who can accept or refuse on their will. But at the moment, so citizen in many cases don't have such so how to say choice. Citizen is just user, not customer. So. To your previous question, I talk about talk about active smart city that provide many functions and to enable citizens to do many things based on the resources smart city provide. But so making citizen customer is another dimension. So to make smart city citizen a customer, so then it is necessary to create open ecosystem and platform-based open ecosystem. So if the smart city is working just like the traditional city, I mean traditional city means that there's one way. The city control everything for infrastructure and public service. Then citizen remain still user, not customer. So to make a customer, city first develop a common public platform. Then enable, make every stakeholders, every players can access to the platform. So under some control for security or other reasons. So certain conditions should be met to make citizen a true customer. Okay, thank you.
That's very good. I'm going to change the order a little bit because I was intrigued by Professor Kwon's comments about how you bring in emerging market people. So Professor Kwon, do you want to talk a little bit about how maybe the customers are different between emerging market customers and advanced country or advanced city customers?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Anderson. And about that, the customers' questions, I can say that the two pages is there. The first one is about Dr. Hwang has already said that the citizens, I think that it may be related with the inclusive plan, urban planning concept for that. I think that in this kind of the customers, the technologies should be developed for the benefit of the many citizens. We must be aware of that the technological gap and discrimination in every city. There is a discrimination for that. Some people is easily contact for this service, but the other cannot do that. So, and we must remember that the smart city are more expensive to develop and expensive to manage and operate than traditional and conventional cities. Some people may not disagree on the distribution of their taxes to the expensive infrastructure, like that the IT technology base. A smart city will be sustainable only when the appropriate definition is implemented for that. That's why the governance is so important for this kind of the customers. I think that we focus on the technology today, but we need to focus more on the citizenship for that. And the second customer is, I think that the older people in the world, I think. Because let's think about that, the technologies developed through that digital platform in San Francisco created many players and vendors, service vendors, and this kind of .com companies create many services to the world, and many world citizens using their new technologies-based services for that. So this kind of the customers is extended to the outside of their each countries or cities for that. In South Korea, the research about and the development of smart city is focused on not only our country and our cities, but this technology service will be adapted to other countries and the cities. It may be that our goal or vision for this next future, the technologies or the development of the smart city, I think. It may be the answer for my think about the customers for the smart city technology. Thank you.
No, very good. We're opening up what we call a can of worms, I think, which is great. That's what we're supposed to be doing. Hey, Jen, let me go to you and ask you the same question. How do you bring customers into the smart city discussion, especially in a powerful way? I mean, it strikes me that that's pretty much what you're doing by monetizing data.
Yeah, so we take our example basically using models that have existed for, almost over centuries in some cases. The model that we look at is when you had financial systems originate, right? What was the value to bringing financial systems and organizing them and structuring them? And what it really is that you're facilitating all the customers in an ecosystem. So in the case of data, just like any other commodity, there's a supply chain, right? So there's producers of data, there's consumers of data, there's analytic services that are drawn out of data, there are innovations that are drawn out of data. So the customers really have to look at where the value proposition lies. And until we can allow those customers to access this system and participate in the marketplace in a transparent way with fair pricing, with acknowledgement of where the data comes, with standardization and contractual deliverance, we can't have the risk management that's involved. And you have to have some form of a governance that people buy into to form that trust that they understand that the value is going to be brought back to them. In the case of the citizen, for instance, they're generating the data, but many times, even governments, they give that data away. And that data for their open services are never coming back to provide services back to the citizens. So there needs to be some sort of meta policy that's formed, which will also form standards across nations, across regions, but also be applied at a high level that trickles down to work within those regional areas that the data as a commodity may be different, maybe in that particular region, but data is data. And as the more those regions actually are able to communicate that data, the value of that data goes up and the value proposition to the customer actually goes up. So the bigger that we can create a marketplace and allow access to consume that information that's been, derived by these sensor technologies, the more opportunity we provide to all the citizens because the innovation will be there. And the more that we can communicate, the more that we can enrich data with other data sources in a very stable marketplace, the better off we all are going to be because we lower everyone's risk and we actually increase the value of the return.
That's great. And, I guess some of you all know I have the privilege of teaching at a course at Smart Cities and Infrastructure at Seoul National University. And one of the students in our last class highlighted the fact that in terms of smart cities, you could argue that Asian countries have more confidence in the authority, let's say, or the ability of the public sector, the governance sector, to take agency, whereas, we kind of in the U.S. and in the West, it's almost wholly to think about the citizens making all the decisions. So with that observation, I think I'll turn to the last speaker in this round, Young-Sup Ju, and with your varied experience, it'll be interesting to hear how you talk about this issue of how do you put the customer at the center or give the customer at least more agency and choice in this whole discussion.
Okay, actually, there's no doubt about the fact that the smart cities must be built on a customer the centric manner rather than a technology centric manner. But actually, it doesn't mean actually we must follow the customer wants the customer needs only, because the customers or citizens do not have enough understanding or enough every information required to understand what kind of the smart cities they want and what kind of smart cities can be possible. So because of that, that's the reason why as you mentioned, the leadership is very important. So leaders needs to be provide citizens and people with that kind of the vision. So of course create consensus from the general public and citizens about that kind of vision. So by doing so, we can create a certain shared vision. Anyway, so in order to do so, one of the most practical way is to create a kind of test bed to showcase certain type of the model of the smart cities. So actually, in order to so we need to start with the identifying or creating very the idealistic or practically the optimal use cases. So we may identify very efficient, effective use cases by using the certain the test bed, by inviting all constituents of the municipalities or citizens to participate in those test bed. So I think that the Korea is a country starting a kind of the data dam projects by creating a lot of data. But at the same time, we need to understand what is the purpose of the collecting data. So actually by showing the people the certain the very nice scenario with using certain effective use cases. So we may come up with a very good consensus among people about the future picture of the smart cities.
That's very helpful. Let me stick with you for the next question to kick off the next round. I don't think it's fair that you go last every time. You have too much of an advantage. So let me stick with you. Can you, and I think it makes sense because you provided a segue for us. Can you give us a sense of what is really, what we would call the killer app, or what is as I said here, what's your favorite example of something that a smart city does that improves people's quality of life? Anything in terms of health, energy, environment, mobility, just a specific example, and then we'll go to Michael. But if we could stay with you, Young-Sup, that would be great.
Start with me?
Yes, if you don't mind. I apologize. I move it around just to make sure that the people in the U.S. don't go to sleep.
Okay.
Now it's
okay, good.
2:30 in the morning in New York.
Yeah, of course, there are a lot of features which can attract the people and then make them understand the benefits of the smart city features. I think that among them, definitely smart mobility could be the most effective way to attract the people and persuade people with to create a certain shared vision. Out of the a lot of the smart mobility features, I think that the smart navigation could be one of the very practical and very useful applications. So actually, these days everybody is using navigation applications, but sometimes those navigation system is based upon the inaccurate information and data about real-time the traffic situation. So by providing a better sensor system to monitor the traffic condition, we can create very smart navigation feature, the applications to the save traffic time and provide the people with the shortcut and time-consuming routing, utilizing that kind of the sensor data. So I think that that could be a very easy and very the effective way to effective example of the smart city features.
No, I think that's great. And I guess shipping is what, 3% of global carbon emissions. And so addressing that issue and making it more efficient makes a huge amount of sense. Michael, back to you. What from your point of view is the real killer app or a great example of a smart city application that really transforms people's lives?
Sure. So, killer app, once it happens, it just explodes, right? It's like something going viral. As most people know, we're very fortunate. We're part of the family of companies of HN Group. They're in Seoul. So we're very lucky to be able to understand a lot of the wonderful innovation that happens in Korea on a daily basis that's so far ahead of the innovative trends that goes on here in the US. And of course, we're their global accelerator to take those trends and move them throughout different opportunities throughout the globe. So we get to see a lot of these different applications that are actually in use in Busan, in Seoul, in different cities throughout Korea, through our parent company. And one of the killer apps that we see out there and that we're also working on that are not yet complete, in the industry, that we'd love to be part of that completion solution for these killer apps, is the combination of all of this IoT data that's created, all the citizen data that's created in some kind of data exchange that's combining non-fungible tokens with DID on a blockchain protocol, but also with our other sister company, HDAC, Hyundai Digital Asset Currencies. HDAC is also creating a financial transaction exchange, for customers, for vendors, for financial institutions, for everyone to come together on a financial exchange to make that transaction much smoother, quicker, safer, and much more, client-friendly. So we're working on one of those potential killer apps, and we think that combining all of that data, and Jennifer knows this better than anybody, right? It's all about the data in all these smart cities, and combining that user environmental open source data that's created on a daily basis, all of those financial transactions with our other sister company, HDAC, finding a way to make that into the behind the scenes use of every vendor, company, citizen, government, entity, et cetera, part of that smart city environment, and making it all seamless and working together, that it would be a killer app.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. And I think giving people a vision, like you just did, of where this is going and how to think forward in terms of technologies, fantastic. Could we go to Jong-Sung Hwang, lead researcher, National Information Society Agency, to answer this question about what do you see in terms of a real application that's going to make a difference or is making a difference in a smart city? Because, often when I talk to people about smart cities, they go, I don't understand what that is. And so it's very useful to have a specific idea or application.
Yeah, in terms of impact, I think CCTV. So many people don't like CCTV, but in terms of impact, so CCTV has made the great contribution in solving urban problems, and also we can think about location-based service. So location, mobile technology and location devices like the GPS. Enhance, improve the public service and many private services a lot. So I think there are several visual applications and technologies. But on the other hand, there are also invisible, invisible to users, invisible applications. So I think geospatial data is very critical to upgrading urban management and public services. The Professor Ju talked about transportation and the traffic management service. So most of those applications actually are based on, rely on geospatial data. And so, the Seoul is very, in fact, advanced than other cities. If someone asks me, what is the best smart city in the world? So I guess many others, so how to say, propose Singapore, and so many cities. But I believe Seoul is very advanced in many ways than other cities. That's why. So if you look at how Seoul metropolitan government manages geospatial data, then you will realize all data are interconnected, and there are open ecosystem that any department and any company to develop geospatial related service, then they can help them help them substantially. So there are hidden, I think there are hidden technology and resources that support at the moment smart city development. Thank you.
That's very good. Super interesting as well. Jen, let's go to you and get a sense from your perspective of what's really a benefit, killer app, smart cities.
I think one of the latest things that I found an interest in is the digital twin technologies. This is a little interesting on our part because what it does is it provides a tool, like a command center tool, to the city to actually have that geospatial information and all that other sensor information centralized and shown together in a useful manner. Additionally, it allows an acknowledgement that you could use the information, but not also put it at risk. So a lot of the big stuff that's going on right now with cities is ransomware, right? Where people come in and they hold their data, and it's a really bad, situation for, cities with very limited budgets that, get held ransom for this. So these digital twins, I've seen have a lot of purpose and actual things that they could be used for, which benefit not only the public sector, but also allows you to have what I call a value in a digital real estate form. Something that can be titled and leased out, very similarly in contracts that you would have for regular real estate. So these, combined with geospatial, technologies. Another one that I find that has absolutely changed the world is Lidar. I think Lidar is one of the greatest technologies that are formed in, some of this information that we gather as it goes through a city. One of the things that people don't think about is that Lidar can be used both ways. For instance, Lidar helps a car company understand the roads and read the signals, but it also helps cities understand where their potholes are. That communication between the OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, and the public sectors is very important. And if we can do that in real time with some of these technologies, and facilitate that contractual exchange in a risk-free way, that we're actually going to get somewhere. We're going to actually move this data so quickly, it's going to actually change the world very, very quickly.
Very good. That's really, really super interesting. Professor Kwon, you get to bring in the emerging market perspective again. Are you actually in Indonesia designing the city, or are you someplace else?
Yeah, there's something very convenient from the customers or the citizens for that in Korea. It is offered by that the coupon it's recently they entered the NASDAQ in US. I think
Right.
that this is maybe the Korean Amazon for that. And there's a service about that recommend and purchase the goods, and it guess maybe Professor Kwon needed this stuff like this water, and I think that the city buys what he think I want and pay for them automatically, and even deliver for that. And the delivery process is guided by the low level of digital twins. And it is a very the exotic service. But on the other hand, I feel like I'm becoming more and more stupid and lazy people. But maybe the smart city and the dumb citizens. And maybe, but I think it's a good model for the service providers and the service vendors for that, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
Great. No, that's really fantastic. We have one more round, and I think we have about 10 minutes left, so I think we're in pretty good shape. Look, Michael, I think you're a perfect person to lead us off in terms of this question. When I was in Seoul, we had a lot of discussions about how the U.S. and Korea can better cooperate around 5G and other issues. But what would be your idea about how the U.S. and Korea can cooperate on smart cities? Is there a good way to answer that question?
Sure, thank you. I'll be brief to give other people time to speak since we only have a few minutes left, but there's so many opportunities that the U.S. Needs help with. As we, unfortunately, as an American, it's hard to say, but we are just so far behind on digital infrastructure and electrification of our cities, mainly because of budgeting, right? The budgeting just has not been there. The Build Back Better initiative is coming along here in the U.S. and the Green New Deal in Korea. The combination of those two initiatives by our great governments are just wonderful. So I think we need to be encouraging of pushing a lot of that funding for those initiatives towards the digitization and electrification of our cities in America, utilizing applications that are already complete in Korea. Since we're still behind Korea, it's not that we have to build something new. We have to create something novel, right? There's so many great things that have already been done with mobilization, applications with the blockchain, the accounting systems using, blockchain systems for accounting as well. The simple thing of the highways in Korea is just fantastic, right? That there's really so few, if any, motorized police on your interstate highway system because you have all of those, devices that are clocking your speed every mile or every kilometer. Right? I wish we had that here in the U.S. Because we could divert more funding.
I don't, but that's okay.
You don't. I like it. But definitely there's just so many applications. And the one thing that we haven't talked about, we talked so much about digitization and electrification and everything else. But let's not forget that we all have to live somewhere. We all have to work inside some kind of structure. So smart building is also a big application, right? We also happen to do 3D construction printing here in the U.S. and also with our sister company HYSYS there in Korea. That's a big trend that's starting to move throughout the globe in the Middle East, in the United States, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, et cetera. China is killing it with 3D construction printing, not just for housing and commercial and industrial, but most especially for infrastructure, for precast, et cetera. So not only do we want to be able to look at many digital applications, but let's also look at the physical smart building applications as well in the future to be able to coordinate between the U.S. and Korea.
That's great. Thank you very much, Michael. And for our lead researcher, Jong-Sung Hwang, Do you have an answer to that question? Is there a good way for the U.S., is that an important question for the U.S. and Korea to cooperate in smart cities?
Yeah, I think so. What I like to ask to U.S. to do for the Korea is to help platform interoperability. Platform interoperability is, in fact, I think everything of smart city, whatever smart city you have in your mind. But so we need to create platform interoperability. So within city there are many platforms. So we have to find ways to connect them each other, and also. There are private platforms like Korean platforms like KT and Kakao, Naver, and also global platforms Amazon, Google, and many platforms. So the problem is that such private platform don't fit with the real space. So let's think about your neighbor. Your neighbor people use different platforms, different global platforms. So we need to anyway find ways to reorganize the data or reorganize people not based on what platform they use, but based on where they live, based on the neighbors, so the real place. So in our smart city policy, so in the back office, the more critical issue is to secure platform interoperability, but. It is actually it's out of our reach. So I think if we develop a partnership between Korea and United States, government, company, and industry to promote the platform interoperability, then I think it will be beneficial to both countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. And Jen, I see that you're in violent agreement with the previous speaker on that issue. Do you want to talk a little bit about how the U.S. and Korea might cooperate?
Yeah, so we'll give you a little bit of background. The regions like US, Korea, other countries, when you're developing any global network, it's always going to start off organically. But again, it really relies on that interoperability. And the way that you get the interoperability is to create what is considered meta policy. Meta policy is how are these exchange nodes that are going to exchange information across borders, how are they going to communicate and who's going to set those standards? And that's where we have to collaborate and we have to create systems that are global. This has occurred. It's occurred in every financial system that's out there that moves money around the world, right? And then payment systems are data systems, but they got together with a membership and they actually realized that meta policy sitting to get that interoperability down pat, creating open standards that people can adopt the system in a safe way. That has the number one thing that we need to work on, because that's the only way that a system can actually work in a global way. That's it. It really relies on that interoperability and self-sustaining.
And it's very interesting too, because Professor Hwang was talking about almost a public platform interoperability rather than all the private platforms we have, and that would drive public goods creation, which is a lot of what smart
like
cities
utility.
do. Yeah,
so I think we need to look like a utility, correct.
I think that's really great. That makes a huge amount of sense. Let me go to Young-Sup Ju, the Distinguished Professor of Smart Cities at Seoul National University. If we could get a sense from you of how the U.S. and Korea should cooperate.
Okay, I think that there will be a lot of areas where the U.S. and Korean, the university, the companies or the researchers work together. Actually, as you know, the all enabling technologies of the smart cities are changing so fast. So the one company or even one country cannot handle those speed of change. So that's the reason why we need to cooperate each other. So actually, I used to be engaged with the Korean government as a minister of the SMEs, small and medium enterprises and startups. At that time, I have been making a lot of efforts to nurture the Korean startups. Actually, those startups are currently working very nicely in the area of the smart cities too, because the smart city includes every important digital transformation technologies, or rather the very advanced technologies, including AI, IoT, and 5G, and cloud, and digital twins, as she said. Actually, by creating a kind of common the smart city pilot projects between U.S. and Korea, or we may maintaining two separate pilot projects, and then inviting the U.S. The startups as well as the Korean startups to those pilot projects. That is the best way to create. Not only develop the technology, but also create very sustainable business models to make the U.S. and Korea collaboration very sustainable.
That makes a lot of sense, and it reminds me of one of the insights I think that came out of our last visit in South Korea, where we realized that the U.S. probably doesn't have a normal institutional counterpart on the 5G issue, and it's probably the same with smart cities. It's unclear to me who in Washington would be the counterparty. So I think that's a really important point. And I think now we want to hear from, and I think you're going to be our last speaker, Professor Kwon, but as Michael suggested, the Biden administration has a Build Back Better approach, but they have a Build Back Better world approach, and we've been working with Professor Huang to make sure that the U.S. and Korea work together on that project. So is there a way for the U.S. and Korea to work together in emerging market smart cities projects? Does it make sense? Is it helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Anderson. The cooperation between the Korea and the U.S. is have some clues in that the U.S. have, but Korea don't have, or the controversially that. I think that the Korea has a very unique the corporate culture, and there is the cases where the construction company and the IT companies are tied up in one group, such as that, for example, the Samsung has a construction company and a semiconductor factories for that. And it is a very unique, but I don't think that the US has this case for like that one. So they built and developed IoT or data science and create new online the business models for that. So I think we can work together in that kind of that one. For example, the US has that very strong and competitive the .com companies, or the basic the technologies, science, and Korea has that this kind of the unique companies like that. We call it that the Jebol for that in Korean language.
Right.
It is another opportunities, because that near the Korea there is lots of the developing countries adapting that smart city technologies, or the built and the new infrastructure adapting that smart city technologies for near that Korean. It is a very geographically chance to that the U.S. and the Korea co-work together, I think. Thank you.
No, I think this is fantastic. I want to thank everybody. This was a marvelous discussion from my point of view. Hugely interesting, hugely valuable. So if we could give everybody a round of applause, and then we'll turn it over to Ms. Min Soo. Thank you very much.